Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I am your host, and for today's episode, we're going to be talking about mistakes and how many of us, myself included, often avoid living life or doing things because we fear making mistakes. This is obviously tied to perfectionism as well. And this is something that I've had to really work on the last couple of weeks, to be honest. And I've known this about myself for most of my life, but it's really becoming more and more obvious to the point where I can't ignore it anymore. And it is ironic because I do a lot of work that requires me to just create and just put things out there without constantly questioning myself. Like a lot of these podcast episodes, the videos I make, I sit down, I do them, I post. Of course, if I look back and I'm like, you know what, I don't really like that, doesn't really align with me the way I said that thing or whatever, then I will either take it down, change it, edit it, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But a lot of the work I do is just me just creating, putting out. And that helps to keep me motivated to avoid falling into that perfectionist tendency. However, I have also realized that there are many other areas in my life where I still let that perfectionism take its toll and prevent me from, stepping up in a way that feels authentic to me and allows me to go after the things I want in life. And this also applies to relationships too. And so one thing I really had to come to terms with, and I was actually talking about in my journal with myself, was that mistakes will be made. Mistakes are unavoidable. Like part of life is mistakes. My whole life I've been trying to avoid mistakes, right? Finding ways to not make mistakes, to not do these things, because the mistakes, the experience of making a mistake and being wrong or whatever feels very painful. It hurts because you berate yourself, you get upset, someone gets mad at you, think, it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to. It can lead to other consequences, whatever. So you want to avoid all those feelings that come along with a mistake. So instead you go, okay, I'm just not going to make a mistake. I'm going to do everything in my power to avoid making mistakes. Now, of course, that is impossible because simply to exist as a human is to make mistakes. You are flawed, you are fallible. You cannot avoid making mistakes. You have to make mistakes in order to learn how to exist as a human being. You are not born knowing everything from the get-go, not having to learn anything. You have to learn. Every single day is a process of learning how to exist in this world. There is no point in your life that you're going to get to a place where you're like, yeah, I know everything now. I'm fully formed. I'm fully perfect. That's it. I've learned everything I need to learn. I think the reason we might think this way is because of the school system. I think because we go through the education system and we think, okay, once we get this and we get this degree, then we know we're informed. We have all the education we need for this thing. And that convinces us that that's what life is like. And it's not. It's not. And I'm having to really let that sink in for me because to try and avoid mistakes all the time, it makes me hold myself back from living life. Because again, life equals mistakes. The two are inextricably linked. You cannot have one without the other. So either you're avoiding mistakes and you're not living life, or you're living life and you're experiencing mistakes. You have to choose which one it is. Now, obviously that sounds kind of depressing, but I've also had to realize and fully, understand for myself, and that's obviously easier said than done. You get to decide how you feel about those mistakes. It's not about avoiding the mistakes. It's not about never making mistakes or doing everything perfectly or being completely fully formed as a human. It's that you will make mistakes, understanding that you will make mistakes, knowing it, preparing for that, and then deciding how you feel about those mistakes. Because the feeling of the mistake is what's making you want to avoid making them, right? So if every time you make a mistake, you hate yourself, you berate yourself, you say mean things to yourself, you hold yourself back from trying again, you're like, what's the point of this? Like, I suck, I'm awful, whatever. Then of course, if that is the experience you're giving to yourself, you're not going to want to make a mistake. You can decide that every time you make a mistake, you will reframe the way you see it. You can decide, okay, I made a mistake. I'm not going to make myself feel like shit. I'm not going to be mean to myself. I'm going to look at it as an opportunity to grow, to change, to evolve. It's painful. It sucks, sure. But I'm not going to be incredibly horrible to myself, or I'm not going to let other people make me feel bad, right? I'm not going to choose to feel bad if someone gets mad at me, berates me for a mistake. Now, of course, some mistakes have very dire consequences. So yes, be as mindful as you can, of course, and also feel the weight of the consequences of your mistakes. Of course, that is really important. It's important to have accountability as well. Because if you're making a mistake willy-nilly because you're not really paying attention to it and you're not, worried about the consequences of it, and that mistake can hurt somebody else, obviously we don't want that. But there's also mistakes that, again, are just part of existing. They're part of being human. Like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And to make yourself feel that way, because maybe you've been conditioned to think that that's how you should respond to mistakes, or maybe growing up you were berated for making mistakes, so now you feel like I have to do that to myself. I have to be my own, hater in a sense, now that you're older, because if you don't have it from your caregivers anymore, now you have it as an adult, you have to be that thing for yourself. Then yeah, you're never going to feel comfortable or okay with mistakes. And the key is not to want mistakes. Of course we don't. Nobody wants to make mistakes. Nobody wants to be proven incapable or incompetent. But understanding that they're going to happen regardless of whether you want them or not, and to choose how you're going to make yourself feel, how you're going to feel about that mistake. That right there is the key. And this is obviously much easier said than done. It is not easy. It's something I struggle with. I still do this to myself when it comes to mistakes. I'm trying to be better at it. And I also understand, in an environment like work, if you make a mistake, yeah, your boss might get angry at you. Your boss might be pissed. Your boss might make you feel stupid or incapable, or, it might really disrupt their day, and you don't want that either. Understandable. And that's valid. Even then, though, in those moments, you get to choose. I can appreciate that this mistake caused someone some more stress. I can appreciate that it is something that maybe I wasn't being mindful of, and I could have done better, or I could have avoided this. And also, I'm going to not let this energy of self-hatred seep in. I'm going to choose to look at it a different way. Even if your boss is just being really rude about it, you can, do what you need to do to fix the mistake. And also remind yourself, this person's taking it a little bit too seriously, or this person is being a bit too much right now, and that's okay. I don't have to express that to them, but that's just something that you can take for yourself. It's okay. It's okay to look at yourself and allow yourself to recognize that you're not always the problem all the time, even if you made a mistake. Because again, everybody does. Humans make mistakes. Like, that is the point of being human, And yeah, it's not easy. It's easier said than done, as I've said a million times in this episode, because it's something that I still struggle with. I'm still on the verge of understanding it, even for myself right now. And it also really ties into avoidance. Avoidance in your life in general, and avoidant attachment when it comes to relationships. If you have a low sense of self-worth with regards to not being good enough, you will fear making mistakes when it comes to relationships, to partnerships, so you'll avoid getting into them altogether. Or say you start getting into a relationship and, someone gets upset with you, or you do something that upsets someone, and because of how triggering that is for you, you might immediately pull away or push them away because you want to avoid that feeling that's associated with the mistake. And so instead, you're like, let me just get rid of every possibility or opportunity that would create a mistake for me. And in your mind, you might think, oh, that means being in a relationship. Like, clearly I cannot be in relationships. I make mistakes in relationships, so I'm just not going to be in relationships. And that's the complete opposite of what we want to do, right? We don't want to hold ourselves back from connections because we fear making mistakes because of what we feel like when we make a mistake, what we make ourselves feel like when we make a mistake. We don't want to do that. We want to understand that we're going to make a mistake. It's inevitable because people have to also teach us how they want to be cared for, right? We don't know that. We can't read their minds. We will make mistakes because we aren't perfect. Again, we do not know what someone's thinking all the time. And we're learning how to be in relationship with them. And, we have to let ourselves be in it and risk the potential of that mistake and be okay with when that mistake happens, to let ourselves know that it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you and your self-worth inherently. Yeah, maybe your approach is a bit off. Maybe your tactics are a bit off, sure. But when it comes to your self-worth, your inherent deep self-worth, it's not about that. Mistakes are just part of being human. And that's really hard to internalize and understand for yourself. But I hope this was helpful. I hope it allowed you to look at your own perfectionism and allowed you to look at how you make mistakes and how you treat yourself when you make mistakes and how that might be holding you back from living life. Because we want to live life. That's the point. We are living life. If you're alive right now, you're living life and it's happening. And I know some people might say, oh, I need to wait until I'm this, or this is perfect for me to start living. It's like, you're already living. It's already passing by. So you have to be active in it. You have to be an active participant now. And again, easier said than done. Life can be very difficult at times. So why are we making it more difficult for ourselves by being so mean to ourselves when we make a mistake, which is inevitable? Mistakes are inevitable, and yet we choose to be mean to ourselves, and we make our life even harder than it has to be. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. If you want to talk about this in more detail with me, you can book a one-to-one call. You can read about these topics on my Substack. It's also a great way to support my content if you're interested. And you can follow my other social media accounts where I post most of my other content as well. Other than that, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.